All right. Hello, hello. Welcome everyone to what will be the grand finale of the Martech show here for 2020. Oh my goodness, the end of 2020. Just even saying those words like brings a smile to my face. Well, we are definitely going to go out with a great episode here. I am very delighted that our special guest is David Edelman, who wow. I mean, like, yeah, just, kind of a legend, in this past decade of, the evolution of marketing and Martech, a lot of practice at Digitas, led practice for digital marketing and transformation at McKinsey, became the CMO of Aetna, all sorts of pioneering work done there, now doing all sorts of actually cool things across the broader marketing and Martech landscape. Dave, welcome.
Thank you, Scott. It's great to be here.
And I am also incredibly grateful that Jim Dixo, the CEO of Sunday Sky generously has sponsored this final episode of the Martech show. And yeah, I'll let him tell you a little bit about that in a bit, but welcome, Jim.
Thanks for having me, Scott.
So Dave, wow, I feel like if I was just going to read to the audience like the list of things you've done and been involved in, like the episode would be over. We'd use up the whole 45 minutes. But I don't know. I mean, given your experience over this past decade of just so much change in marketing and Martech, first question is like, what's your perspective on this? Like all these different roles you've done, is there like some common thread between all of this?
Yeah, a while ago, actually before even the internet was launched, I had started to see the link between marketing and information technology. Back in the late 80s, it was starting to become a thing. I was part of a team at the time at the Boston Consulting Group, came up with the term segment of one marketing, and it was in the early days. We started to build some capability in helping companies do that. And basically what's happened in the marketing and technology world is just an accelerated march towards making that possible. And the common thread that I've seen in my own career has been riding that trend, helping companies get the value out of it, out of segment of one, which is essentially personalization at scale, doing it in a way that's agile, that's constant test and learn stuff, Scott, that you've been talking about for a while, because you've got to test and learn in order to figure out how to optimize it. And also taking the creative and emotional side to actually make it engaging as opposed to mechanical. So you've got to have that creativity. And so bringing those things together, that's what it's been about. And I've started for a long time on the client service side, helping companies set up and figure out how to do that, and then had the privilege of being able to bring that to Aetna and actually bring it hands-on to life in the healthcare industry.
Yeah, and now you're doing a fair number of different things in the space. I think actually working with a lot of Martech vendors now too. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, sure, Scott. So I did leave Aetna about 3 months ago and have been working with a number of startups in the marketing technology and a little bit in the health tech space, all around this theme, especially focused on personalization and also bringing artificial intelligence to bear in marketing. And it's just amazing the way technology can bring to life a lot of stuff that's been manually done. When I was at Aetna, that I wished I had these capabilities, and now I'm seeing the possibilities as I start working with companies. One, for example, in the media optimization landscape, a company called Elsy, ELSY, who can take all the different investments that you've got in media across the board, across every platform, bring that together in one screen and use artificial intelligence to help you optimize that investment like it's a hedge fund portfolio. Wow. Every day, seeing how your media across the board is doing and being able to create scenarios, move money around, all of that. I mean, we had probably 15 people working on that. And when something's fast paced, the ability to take that and optimize it is incredible. And then, of course, Sunday Sky, who we'll talk about later, who I also had the privilege of working with at Aetna and getting to know them, bringing the engagement side of it to bear through personalized video and making that happen at scale. So, some other ones I may talk about later, but it's just been really exciting to see it all happen, come to life, seeing companies starting to use this. There's just a lot of disruption ahead from bringing these capabilities to bear that I think is good. It's exciting.
Yeah, I think that was one of the things, certainly when we were doing our prep call and chatting for this and, talking about some of the companies that you're working with. I mean, I, of all people, should know this, but I found myself like re-enthused, from, looking at this through your eyes again, that, wow, for all the transformation and change and innovation that has happened here over the past 10 and 20 years, it's not slowing down. I mean, like, what's ahead for us here in the next 10 years is really going to blow people's minds. So I'm definitely, we'll keep coming back to like, the longitudinal perspective you have of, just having seen, this whole industry and practices, evolve over, the past decade, several decades. I'm with you on the several decades. But also, I mean, I think it's really fascinating that, you now have the perspective of like, okay, you've done this from, seen this from the agency lens, you've seen it, in management consulting, you've actually been a CMO of like, a major consumer brand yourself, you're now working with, the Martech vendors, I mean, it's like there are relatively few people who have had that vantage point of being able to see at such a high level, from those different perspectives. So I guess one question I'd love to ask you is like, those different participants in the world of, marketing and Martech, any thoughts on like, what the next 10 years looks like for the relationships between them?
I think one of the biggest thing that's going to happen is a complete rethink about what marketing operations is about. Everyone gets super excited about the creative side and a lot of marketing strategy and segmentation strategy and the things that you're typically taught in business school. But I think a lot of this is going to be working from the ground up of being able to rethink operations in marketing. If you can do personalization at scale and actually make that happen with a limited number of people, that bubbles up to your strategy because it unlocks the art of the possible in ways you probably have never thought before. If you can do, for example, personalized video across all the different points at which somebody interacts with you, that changes your whole concept of communication, the way you want to unlock data, the creative that you're building because you're now creating modular video. All of that is interlinked, and I see more changes of that happening. I also see more companies turning to artificial intelligence to make sense of their data. And one of the subtle things that AI is doing is it's making it easier to stitch data together, not just interpret data. But one of the biggest challenges in the marketing realm has been, I've got data here, I've got it in this legacy system, this system of record. I'm trying to bring it together. I want to understand the customer journey. I've talked about the customer journey for a long time. It's been a struggle to bring the data together to do that. But now there's artificial intelligence. A company, one is called Pointillist that I've gotten to know, can actually use AI to find the identifiers and stitch people together. So AI can solve a lot of problems that have frustrated marketers that they've talked about and wanted. The key, though, is to build it into your operations and the way you're thinking about setting up your organization, the focus of people, and then having that bubble up to change the way you think about strategy.
Yeah. All right. We are definitely going to have to plumb into this more about, yeah, as the innovation happening on the Martech side just continues to accelerate, and some of these things you've been talking about, right? I mean, it wasn't that long ago. They sort of felt like in the realm of, Martech science fiction. They're very real, but yeah, I mean, how companies have to be able to adapt, within their organizations and marketing operations to really take advantage of this. Yeah, it feels like, yeah, a lot of challenges there. And this is also the perfect segue. Jim, you'll notice I put the little halo on you as our sponsored guest, because I always like to promise sponsors that they'll get a halo effect, from being on the show. So truth in advertising. Would you
I thought it
mind
was just
telling
related to
folks
my
a little
bald
bit
head for
about
some
Sunday
reason.
Sky?
I'm sorry?
Could you tell folks a little bit about Sunday Sky?
Certainly. So Sunday Sky built a video experience platform that allows brands to engage consumers with video-powered experiences that are able to be built uniquely for each person to allow them to engage those people in a much more empathetic and human way, to educate them on a myriad of topics, and most of all, inspire them to take action, and action that is beneficial to the individual and also beneficial to the brand. So as Dave talked about, the idea of marketing to a segment of one, really the only way to really do that is to have content that is atomized, broken down into its component parts, and then built for that person based on the data profile, what you know about that person at that moment in time. And so what Sunday Sky invented is an ability or a software language and a platform that allows video to be componentized down to literally the atom level, and built uniquely for each person, rendered in real time, and able to do that in the billions mass scale, such that video powered experiences drive that value of engage, educate, and inspire.
Cool. All right. Well, I'm gonna follow up on that with seeing if Dave will be able to walk us through an example of like how he actually worked with you guys on that at Aetna. But before we do that, again, thank you for sponsoring this episode. The nonprofit that you chose to donate to on behalf of the show for this sponsorship. Can you just tell us a little bit about it?
Sure. We've had a relationship with the Food Bank for New York City for a number of years. We are headquartered in Midtown Manhattan, and we do have a large team in New York. And one of the key themes for Sunday Sky, like most companies, is to drive value for all stakeholders, not just shareholders, but our local community stakeholders. So we've donated both time and money to the Food Bank for New York City over the years, and there's now more than ever a need for that kind of time and money donation to feed people in need. So the catalyst being the Martech show was great, but we are absolutely supportive of this group on an ongoing basis.
Awesome, thank you. All right, I'm gonna stop sharing slides here. So for the rest of this, we can just really dive in on the conversation side of things. So Dave, could you maybe start, like concrete example of how did you guys harness Sunday Sky at Aetna?
Sure. So if you think about your health insurance, you probably don't want to think about your health insurance because it's so complicated and you don't necessarily understand what's in it. There was even an article recently in the New York Times from Paul Krugman, one of the top economists in the world, who could not easily figure out what was the best health insurance for himself. So it's confusing. So when you pick a health insurance plan, do you really understand what you own? And there's serious consequences by not understanding that. You're going to have questions that are going to make you call into the call center. You may choose doctors that are not necessarily in network, do behaviors that cost you more money. There could be benefits you're not taking advantage of that you don't realize you have access to. And all of that denigrates from what our brand could really offer. So offering personalized videos just felt like a breakthrough way of communicating with consumers, changing their initial interaction with the brand. This is one of the first times they can really feel the brand, because health insurance is kind of a nebulous thing, but an onboarding video can bring that to life. So working with Sunday Sky, we created videos that would go to members. We would promote it along with sending them their membership card, and the video would also be accessible in the online portal whenever they were there. And it would explain to you your plan that you specifically bought, Scott. So what are the features of your plan? Who in your family is covered by which, just making sure the right beneficiaries are there. What are the different components of that plan? And some of these things are complicated: deductibles, co-pays, co-insurance, but it explains all of those, says what your numbers are in terms of how that all works, gives examples, and then also suggests for you in your geography ways of managing those costs. It verifies whether you have a primary care physician, and if you don't, here's a link to choose them in your area. Have you signed up for paperless? If not, here's a link to sign up. Here are some advantages to this plan and capabilities you may not have realized you can take advantage of. Click here to register. And if you notice, besides just telling you about these things in a great personalized way, there's also calls to action. And those calls to action are measurable. So you can actually then see what's happening as a result. You can, of course, track the view-throughs, which were really impressive, but you can also track the calls to action and actually tie it right down to ROIs from those actions, or also do split control tests where people see the videos or don't, and measure things such as renewal rates, calls into the call center, and get a whole ROI out of that. So it fits not only with the segment of one, but what I loved about working with Sunday Sky was the agility, the ability to test and learn, create different segments, try different things. And then our creative team was able to think in a very different way about creating the content for Sunday Sky, which is what I mean by the operational thinking before. So doing the Agile and setting up to constantly test and learn, and then getting the creative operation to think about video in terms of components. That's just a different way of thinking. But we unlocked a lot of value, so much so that when I left Aetna, got back in touch right away with Sunday Sky. And so I am working with them now as an advisor.
Awesome. Awesome. Wow. Okay. So there's so many threads I can tug on this. Let me start with getting a bit of a picture, not just for Edna, but, Jim, I'd love your perspective on just, for other clients you have of what the technology components are that surround Sunday Sky. Because this vision you've laid out, Dave, of okay, well, we've got all this data that we can then use to personalize, and then we can, have that feed into call to actions that are happening elsewhere in the organization. And then we feed that back for the analytics and the ROI. Sounds absolutely awesome. How the heck do you actually do this? Like, what are the pieces that fit together to make this work?
Yeah, if we start out with the idea of video powered experiences, what they are. Dave mentioned it, but I'll expand a slight bit on it. Is the idea that instead of a linear medium, video now becomes a modular medium. So Dave mentioned copay as an example. The topic of copay has its own degree of complexity and some information about it. So instead of having copay just be part of a video, copay is its own scene, where that scene stands alone and explains copays, and it can vary how copay works depending upon which insurance package you've purchased. So the idea of modularizing content, choosing individual topics, creating a unique scene for each topic, those scenes can then be included or excluded in your video for you based on whether or not copay is a relevant topic for you. And if it's included for you, then the data about the copay choices you've made and how copay works for you changes the content of the scene because it's now included in your video, to explain the uniqueness of your copay choices. So if you understand that concept of modularization and then data-driven activation, first and foremost, the only way data-driven activation can work is if you have data. So there are a host of different types of data sources that would power these experiences. In the case of Aetna, it could be a claim system. It could be their product management system that describes the product that you've chosen. For advertising, it could be a customer data platform or a DMP. So that for bill explanation, it could be the billing system. So a whole bunch of different data applications that would power these experiences. But then you also have touch points in the consumer journey where you would engage them. And so Dave mentioned that it's pushed out via email, and it's also available in the portal. It could be available in the mobile app. It could be pushed via SMS. It could be activated over paid channels. So there's a whole host of Martech and AdTech capabilities to deliver these experiences. And then just lastly, as you think about the idea of what's the next best action you want an individual to take as an input to driving the recommended communication and the calls to action, there are a bunch of systems that support that notion of AI-driven next best action recommendation. So, system of data, system of insight, and then Sunday Sky becomes a system of activation.
So on these different data like sources and also like, the algorithms for things like next best actions, I'd imagine, particularly when you're dealing with companies that, like Aetna's size, like there's this mix of custom technology that they've built that's unique to their business, and then these other commercial packages, that they've deployed as part of their stack. Any sense of like, just, what that ratio looks like across customers, or has that been changing? Are you seeing more commercial software? Is it becoming more custom? Any patterns?
Yeah, I think, well, first of all, a lot of the largest enterprises we work with have grown through acquisition over the years. So there's a rationalization that's happening independent of whether it's legacy system or off-the-shelf technology. But as legacy systems go through an evaluation, the idea of accessing data, making it available to support digital experiences, which all brands are trying to do, right, is use their data to individualize experiences across the enterprise. More and more companies, our experience is moving from legacy systems to commercial off-the-shelf systems, but then, trying to figure out how all of those systems interoperate across the enterprise. In and of itself, as Dave said, it's moving from being a tactical execution to being more of a strategy enabler. So the decisions and the discussions about those capabilities are happening at a much more senior level than we've experienced in the past, and a lot more happening inside of marketing and collaboration with IT versus IT system decisions driven into the rest of the business.
So Dave, you and I have chatted a bit about this before, but I'd love, some of your perspective on like, what are the different pieces of technology that you see feeding into a platform like Sunday Sky?
Yeah, so as Jim talked about, one of the key things are systems of record by which you understand the state of the customer in your business, what products they have, the product definitions, what is that product, for example. But then all of the CRM systems have to be, it's useful if they are connected. What have you done to interact with this customer before? Have they responded to things? What is their channel of choice? The CRM system may also become the way the video is actually conveyed to the customer, maybe sent through, for example, a link sent by Salesforce Marketing Cloud through email, for example. On the back end, in terms of the calls to action, they may go to a website where Adobe Experience Manager, for example, could be there. And so you want to be able to link into that. And I know Sunday Sky's got links into all of those. And a lot of these APIs are getting simpler to use and connect with. And as I said, even for other companies too that I'm working with, there's more AI that's allowing that data, even beyond the APIs, to get stitched together better. What's interesting too is that we found with Sunday Sky is also our content management and digital asset management system needed to be linked, because we also wanted to bring our branding into that. And so just making sure, all of the templates and colorization and fonts and all of that just naturally, seamlessly moved in. And our creative team is used to using our content management and digital asset management system. So linking those in was important as well.
All right, I could easily spend this entire show just like, diving into the different technologies that get connected here. I love that stuff. But I guess some of the other topics I want to make sure we get to is, you had said this several times about, the agility and the test and the learn. And yeah, I'd love to get your perspective on, having led this with so many different, teams and so many different companies. Like, how do you help a company get better at test and learn? And I kind of maybe seed it to you in two parts, where one part is like the big idea, right? Like even this thing of saying, hey, okay, well, what if we had personalized videos for everybody's, onboarding with insurance, right? I mean, that never conceived of before, never even possible before until this new technology. Like, how do you get those ideas, pushed through, organizations, very cross-functional. And then, yeah, maybe we can sort of, slide from there, further down of like, yeah, that once you've got the big idea and it's the core framework is there, like, how do you keep that rolling? Like, how do you develop that, sort of agile, ongoing learning, optimization? Where do you want to start?
Yeah, sure, Scott. So one of the key ways a lot of these discussions start is by looking at a marketing strategy plan and asking the question, how do you know that's going to work? Because it presumes so much over usually the course of a year. Aren't there just an amazing number of uncertainties in that plan? If we just hit a button and did that plan, are we really that confident? And the answer, of course, is no, because there's so many variables that are going to come crashing into the company. And you may have a good idea of behaviors you want to influence, things you want to do, but you don't know what's really going to work, or even if what worked in the past is going to continue working, or even if your ability to buy Google AdWords at a certain price is going to stay at that price. I mean, none of that is stable. So you've got to be able to take a much more dynamic look. And so it often starts with a conversation saying, come on, life isn't stable. It's not static, it's dynamic. So we've got to get the capability to be way more dynamic in how we approach things. And so let's look at the capabilities we have. Let's look at the marketing objectives that we have prioritized and say, how can we start using what we have against key objectives to have just much faster cycles, much faster, test and learn, test and learn. And I frequently call them war rooms. So setting up a war room that is focused on a particular objective, whether it's increasing, in the case of when I was working with Aetna, B2C sales. So a part of our business was B2C. And we didn't know what was going to work. So we had to get a cross-functional team together. So marketing strategy, marketing operations, creative, analytics, even legal, you had to have at the table. We had to give them some funding in advance, take some risk, and start though saying, okay, these are the metrics we're going to go after. Let's start working in 2-week sprint cycles. We have a backlog of things we want to test. Let's start going that way, which is all the principles of Agile, Scott, that you and I have talked about for years. But you've got to get it hands-on. And then when you get access to new technologies like a Sunday Sky, who comes in, gives a presentation, opens your mind, you then start having a backbone engine that you can start using to plug in, okay, the next thing we want to test is, can we do personalization? And once you start testing and learning and seeing that it actually adds results, that starts bubbling up to the plan. And the overall plan says, okay, we're going to start doing personalized videos. If we do that, that means we've got to create content that explains things in a video fashion more. We've got to do a bit of budgeting for that, but we're going to be paying for that because there's going to be fewer calls into the call center. And so we're going to rethink the shuffling of our resources in order to go after and exploit this opportunity. So a lot of it comes from accepting uncertainty and working through to create an engine that can go against that.
Wow, yeah, very eloquently said. It's like, yeah, just the reality is uncertainty. Okay, now how do you deal with it? Jim, I mean, you're in a similar position of, having this benefit, of seeing across so many different customers, they all get the same, technology capability from you. There's a distribution curve of those who get, really successful at how they harness, that modularization and testing and learning. And there's probably, I suspect, the other half of the distribution curve that they're still struggling with, not the technology, but really just, how do they even run the operations? How do they operate to take full advantage of that? Any perspective on, what helps people fall in like one half of that distribution curve versus the other?
Yeah, I'll actually channel some of Dave's history as a management consultant, as some of the conversations we've had, where you think about any initiative to try and drive change. There's technology that enables that, but what people in process changes are almost as important as what the technology enables or what the technology offers. And then the governance of making sure that you actually deliver the results that you expected with some sort of operating plan to optimize as part of the execution. So the number one challenge we see is companies that have made the journey towards rationalizing their customer data in a way that unlocks it and makes it usable for these kinds of experiences. And then the second is companies who have rationalized how they engage the consumers cross-channel. So, if you have there's some companies that have an email marketing team with the data that supports email marketing, and that's a different team and a different data than what supports the experience on the website. And that's a different team and even some variations of data and how that activates in the mobile app. And so now you have team-centric silos for activating experiences. And so they think about themselves in their functional silos, whereas the consumer just thinks about it as the brand that I'm engaging. And when it's disjointed, then that's a customer experience problem. And the reason it's disjointed is a technology, people, and process problem, where it's in many ways it's the people structure and the processes you build to optimize within your team that really is the problem. And so the until you have someone at Dave's level sitting above those teams that is focused on the customer at the center as opposed to the channel at the center, is really where we start to see the transformation and the companies that are on the more successful side of the curve versus those that are still siloed, and candidly where our relationships are more down in the, within a silo. We tend to be more challenged in realizing the full value of what we can enable.
Scott, can I just build on something Jim said? Because I think there are a couple of good examples of where that silo thinking and breaking out of it is actually, it's addressable, and you can do really good things if you break out of that. For example, when you're looking at the customer experience now, as I had mentioned earlier, there is technology now One company I mentioned earlier, Pointillist, where you can actually track customer journeys. There's a field of journey analytics that can help you timestamp how somebody is moving across all of your touches through all of your systems. And you can follow those things and see what drives unwanted calls into the call center, what drives attrition positively, what drives cross-sell. But the problem is everyone's in their different silos. Nobody setting up the capability to look at journeys is just not a natural act yet. And so thinking about that as a measure of how you're performing, how is a journey happening, it is a pivot in mindset. And it also happens in media. So you've got your folks optimizing search, optimizing social, optimizing TV, and usually even your media agency, if you're working with them, is very siloed in the way they're looking at it. And so you've got great systems to optimize your bidding in Google or your targeting in Facebook, but can you look across the portfolio? And media planners are all chopped up. And so now again, there's AI, and a lot of this is being unlocked through new systems that have AI that can stitch that all together. And company I mentioned earlier, Elsie, you can bring all of that together in a single pane of glass, but you also have to have the mindset that you want to break down the silos and manage media as an integrated investment. So, in general, if marketers can look at the whole and not get caught up in the way their organization is set up, they can take much more advantage of the technologies that are coming out.
I have a follow-up for you there, but let me just make sure our folks in the live studio audience, if you have any questions here for Dave and Jim, please do feel free to throw them into that Q&A box. Man, I'm eating up so much of this time, so you have to be fast on this. But follow up while folks are thinking about questions to pop in there, Dave. How do you do this, right? This breaking of silos, because again, when you're dealing with really large organizations, like there's just so many people, and I definitely I love the example you gave of, like these war rooms of saying, okay, well, if we're going to have a particular motion that we're running on, like pull that cross-functional team together, get them in one room, or I guess today it might be one virtual room, but it's basically like this smaller group that works together to basically bust out of functional silos. But I assume there's a limit to how many people are in the war room before it violates the fire marshal principles. How do you think about that at a larger scale, just getting out of that siloed mentality?
I think you still have to look at it in terms of what are your objective functions as opposed to how you are set up and aligning against the objective function. So if your objective function is to, for example, another war room we had was to drive healthier behaviors, use marketing to get people to take a next best action in their health. And Jim mentioned next best action. So that is an objective. We got to step back from the way we're set up organizationally. The goal is to get people to take a next best action. So we align a team going after that. What ends up happening is there's so many next best actions, over 100, that we have to create 5 different teams that are focused on that and align them against different actions. In the case of working with Sunday Sky, another objective was to get a whole range of actions coming out of onboarding. And so to think about the journey in terms of the stage of onboarding. So we had to bring folks together. So it's really around goals. It allows you to be much more accountable from a metrics perspective. In the end, when you do that, I actually find the conversation with your C-suite peers and especially with the CFO becomes a lot easier because you're tying what you're doing and how you're aligning to something you can put on the table as impact. it's hard because you are moving people around, and then it gets into HR issues of who evaluates who hires who, and there's subtleties, yes, that you do have to work on, but it's around driving to what are your objective functions and aligning against that.
So is one way to picture this almost like a kind of a dynamic matrix that, like you still have like your core group or function. I think like in the Spotify Agile model, right? It would have been like your tribe of this stuff.
Well,
But
yes,
then, yeah, you dynamically get assigned to these different like Agile teams or war room teams. That's actually where maybe most of the action really happens. But that there's still, some sort of other underlying structure that continues to hold together, like, hey, I've got a marketing team of hundreds of people, like, who do they report to technically on a given day?
Yeah, creative is a good example of that. And yes, the Spotify model, which got a lot of buzz when it was first published, I guess it was like 5-6 years ago, that really is a lot of the blueprint for this. So for example, yes, there's still a creative organization, and they are hiring creatives and evaluating creatives, but those creatives are assigned to different war room teams. And so a big part of their evaluation is also, how's it going in those war room teams? Are they driving towards the performance goals? Do their team members, and with a 360 evaluation, feel they are contributing to the team? And they spend most of their time in the war room, but you do have to pull them back to the rest of creative so they can learn more about their craft. And so there is a dynamic from an HR and talent development perspective that I don't think we've got nailed at all, but there's a lot of value to rethinking it from just simple functional silos.
Yeah. So what about the next level up, right? So, some very creative ways about how you think within the marketing org, of operating. What about like the engagement between marketing and other key teams? Finance, IT, any perspective now on that?
Some of the war room teams absolutely go beyond cross-functional. So for example, the B2C sales team had folks from sales on there, had folks from product management. There was a finance person. They grew as we started to realize the second order effects. I'll give you a great example. We were so successful in driving leads, we were overwhelming the inbound telemarketing team. That's not good, right? That's a waste of money. So you need to have the telemarketing team in the room versus just simply downstream. So you've got to get that all linked. And so gradually some of these things snowball. And you do start creating cross-functional teams. What I found, though, was great. It allowed me as a CMO to be even more tightly bound to my C-suite peers because we realized we were getting something done together. We were sharing in the metrics. We had our teams working together. It forced me to work even more laterally than vertically. But it was, the whole organization felt that momentum.
Very cool. Well, listen, I know we are almost out of time. So I thought maybe a great way to end this show and this season and this year, every time I say this year, I just get a smile on my face. If you guys could each offer sort of one perspective to listeners of like, okay, as they're going into 2021, what's something they should think about? What would be something you'd recommend them to look at differently, or, some sort of way to, take a fresh start in 2021 to make a great impact?
Who should go first, Scott?
Yeah, it's a race. We'll see which one of them gets there first.
Jim, why don't you go first?
I would say that the number one thing that the word that comes to mind from 2020 is resilience. So the fact that everybody had to develop a degree of resilience that maybe they didn't deal with in the past, and that's because of the uncertainty. So the fact that so many things were uncertain and candidly to a degree still are uncertain. So the number one thing I would say for January 1st is a new year, but the reality is we all need to continue our ability to thrive in an era of uncertainty, and we need to have resilience. So I would say that people should be prepared for this being the basis of the future, not that we're going back to the ways of the past.
Yeah, and I'd like to build on what Jim said, but using a different word that I relied on earlier, which is agility. So how are you dealing with uncertainty by testing and learning and doing it at scale and building it into the fabric? Are you deliberately testing? Are you deliberately trying to build new knowledge, create more data from doing testing? How fast can you cycle? Do you have the teams, the technology to do that constantly? Because it is so uncertain, and you're going to have the operations that are constantly managing in that mode.
Nice. Well said. Well, listen, Dave, Jim, thank you so much for being here on this episode. I hope you both have wonderful holidays, 2021. A new year with resiliency and agility for all. I love it. To those in the audience, thank you so much. It's been a great season here with you, and looking forward to seeing you in the year ahead. Take care.
Good.
Thanks for having us, Scott.
Yep. Thanks.